So we have a very short amount of time, and they are all going to speak for 5 minutes. So what I'm actually going to do is turn it upside down, and I'm going to frame a question to them, and then let them answer for 5 minutes each. And then when they're done, it will be open to the audience, and I will not speak a word. That work? So what I will do is I'll start with each mayor, ask the question, they'll speak for 5 minutes, and then go on to the next mayor. Is that all right? Okay. So my first question will go to Paris, the Honorable Vice Mayor Bloel of Paris. So my question for you is that your climate plan is extremely impressive as you reach 50% reduction in emissions by 2030 and 100% by 2050. So you're pretty aggressive. You also target the building construction and the food sectors in particular. Here we see a lot of focus on electricity and electric vehicles, but not as much on buildings and food. Can you give us some specific policy options that our leading climate cities like San Francisco and Oakland could pursue in food and construction?
Okay, well, I'm going to put my paper down because it's nothing to do with that. So let's change it. So hello everybody, really happy to be here and really happy to be with my colleagues of other cities. Just maybe to give you the prospect of what is Climate Action Plan in Paris and then to focus on this question. So we are now on the third Paris Climate Action Plan that was just voted by the City Council last year. It's now 10 years that Paris is very committed to tackle climate change. So this is our new Climate Action Plan that I'm really proud of. That we conceived as really an answer to the urge of the climate crisis, but also really an answer to COP21 agreement with the idea to traduce the political commitment into a real climate action plan. So the aim of this plan is to make Paris by 2050 as a 100% renewable energy city, but also carbon neutral. And we took that carbon neutrality thing in the largest definition that we could have, as you were saying, meaning we want to go to zero emission by 2050 on the Parisian territory. We are now focusing on then building, transportation, energy, obviously, etc., etc. But also we're working on the global footprint of Paris, that we want to be minus 80% of GHG emission by 2050, meaning global footprint means foods. The apple you eat in Paris is not produced there and not dealt with as a garbage in Paris itself, but also we're taking into account the airplane's emission that no one wants to take. So when the Paris people's going on holiday, we want to be able to act on that too. So minus 80% by 2050 and the 20% remaining on the global footprint have a new policy on compensation. So just to make it clear, so the thing is built on different pillars. First is public policies. Second is definitely mobilization, because the idea is that only 20% of the GHG emission we can deal it with a decision in the City Council, so we need only 80% remaining to be able to take all the stakeholders on board. So I actually wanted today to stress on that mobilization thing, because I think everybody all around the world has to deal with that first. But as you were talking about food and building, let's focus on that. I think definitely they are sometimes forgotten by the climate debate. Yes. To speak about retrofitting buildings is not sexy at all, and it doesn't interest a lot of people. But actually in Paris, it's now today the first source of GHG emission on the territory emissions. So we have launched for 10 years now a wide program to retrofit all the social buildings, so the ones that are owned by the city. So meaning a lot of money to make 5,000 social units retrofitted each year since 2008. So we are now on a really good dynamic to reach that 2050 goal. But the idea is not to go on the private sector, because we need all the flats in the private area to reach on the dynamic, but also all the offices, hospitals. So that is our work today. We just launched a program for 2 years now to address people in their flat. We have mobilized like 40 million of euros to make that switch. But it's not that easy, because it's very difficult in France to take private sector on board. But I think a good thing to make people switch in it is that what we did till now, we just have the first result of having 1,000 to 2,000 local jobs being created by retrofit. it's on average minus 30% of the bill of the tenants on energy saving. And it's also a good result on lowering air pollution, that we have big problems right now in France about that. So that's about retrofit. I don't know how much I have left, so let's go on food thing. Food is also very important, but I think there's like something cultural going on in France right now, that people are asking themselves a lot of questions about what they have in their plate. Going from the plate to the planet, about healthing, about the impact we have on our countryside, about what's the life of the peasant and the farmers that have really economical problems. So we have started now some years ago with a plan just on our collective canteen in Paris, meaning kindergarten, schools, senior restaurant, but also the people working for the city of Paris. By 2020 will be 50% of the food served will be organic and local, and we're gonna meet that criteria, so we're getting quite good on that. But to do so, we are like dealing a lot to support organic farming, which is kind of really hard in France, which likes a lot of pesticides and big companies. Maybe it's something you know here. And so we have like contracts with farmers. They are protecting lands, but also water resources for the city. We're linking all of that together. And with the strength of that experience, we're now trying to expand the dynamic on restaurants, shops in Paris, and we have now since 1 year a new program on that, on how to make all the territory switch to that, and how to make also the demonstration that ecological transition is good for the planet, but also for local economy, for your health, and for many different things at the level of a territory development. And maybe to conclude, because I think I've already been long enough, I just want to say a word about citizen mobilization, because that's something I'm curious to see if someone has to react on it, especially also in other cities. I think what we all have now to deal with climate action is how you take more and more people on board. We are a lot of people here in San Francisco now really convinced about the idea that we have to act, but now we have to make one step further and have much more people on board. So to do that document, we've been having 2 years of discussion with the citizens of Paris on all levels, association, NGOs, experts, and individuals that wanted to participate. And the question we put to them was, how do you dream Paris in 2030, 2050 regarding climate change and the scarcity of natural resources? Actually, it was not that easy to go beyond your imagination boundaries that we all have, and to dream that city and to go to new topics. And it was not that easy. We had a lot of people, but it was not that easy to make them enter that discussion. And I think this is the big deal we have now, how you deconstruct in a way the global system we've been growing it, and how you put that next step to, we have the vision of 2050, but what is next step and how we take people on board. So just to finish on it, we made a vote, a citizen vote on the climate action plan to ask people if they agree with that document. We had like 20,000 people, which is a lot and not a lot, we can discuss it, that participate. But what is interesting is that 7,000 people signed to be volunteers for climate in the city. We're going to have the first meeting with them next week and see how they can enter that dynamic. And I think that's the biggest deal we have right now to accelerate and make pressure on people running.
It's pretty impressive, you know, because governments always compete with the dollars that they have. You know, we have competing priorities here. We have homelessness, we've got, you know, housing shortages, and then if you're looking at climate change. So it's quite impressive that you're looking at two areas which actually take much more money from the government. You know, the government has to invest in both of those areas, so that's really wonderful.
And
Thank
it's
you.
a lot of money to wait also. So.
Yeah, it is. Thank you very much. The Honorable Mayor Johansen of Oslo.
Aye.
You thought you were last, huh?
I was so relaxed.
I could see that. So you're another city whose climate change is also quite impressive, and it ties directly to your city budget and finance strategy. This seems to be a really powerful way to ensure that all city agencies engage directly in the climate effort. Was it difficult to actually link these processes, and can you describe how it is unfolding in real time?
Thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation to come here, and it's important topics that we are about to discuss. And I want to start to quote the new research informs us that the climate change is happening faster than expected, and it's more extreme than the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned just 3 years ago. And for the first time in history, more than half of the population in the world lives in cities. And we alone are responsible for 70% of all the pollution, the emissions. So it means that we can be the big problem, but we can also be the solution. Oslo, it's a quite small city, 700,000 inhabitants. It means that we can be, we're not that big, but we're not that small, so we can be a test bed for big cities like Paris and London and others. And we see that as an obligation. I will mention 3 things that I think it's important for us. We are now the electric vehicle capital of the world. It means that now in 2018, 60% of all new cars sold are either electric or hybrid car plug-ins. 43% it's electric vehicles. And this is because of the cooperation between the state and the municipality. The state makes it quite cheap to buy. They take away the VAT. And the city makes it easy to use. It's free parking stations. It's possible to drive in the public lanes, the bus lanes, and it's cheaper to drive through the toll rings. All these incentives has also led to this change, and we are making it more expensive to drive diesel cars, and also petrol. So that's one thing, the electric vehicles. And as you rightly mentioned, we are the first city that has established a so-called climate budget. It means that we count CO2 in the same way as we are counting money. And each part in the community, they are responsible, and they need to report back what they have done. So then they have clear targets, and they have to report if they are able to reach them or not. Because often climate issues is far away, and it's not our concern, but now we make it simple and easier for us also to conduct on behalf of the climate budget. And of course it's difficult because here it's what we want to achieve. And when we look into all the details, it's not easy to reach our goals, but then we have to see and find out this is the reason why we didn't reach our goals. So I'm happy I was just in a meeting with the mayor of Sydney, so they also now starts to implement the climate budget. And please just come to Oslo and see how we have done it, and it's possible to export it. This is the second thing. And the third thing I want to mention is the fossil-free construction sites. It's because how we have developed our procurement strategy. It means that we want to use our power as a municipality when we buy goods and services. For example, municipality of Oslo, we buy goods and services for 20, you know it, you're from Norway, 25 billion Norwegian kroner, how much in dollar approximately? You will tell them.
4 billion.
How many? How much?
3 or 4 billion, is it?
4 billion Norwegian kroner. This means that we have, say that we want a fossil-free construction sites, so we put forward demands to those who deliver. So in a short time of period, we have been able to change the market because now they know what they have to offer. And the private enterprises, they are really very forward-leaning. They want to produce, now we have an electric diggers. And in few months it will be total fossil-free. It's electric, also on the construction sites. And the construction sites in big cities, they are responsible for so much pollution. Both that they are, what they are doing with the air quality, but also with the climate emissions. So this was just 3 examples: the procurement strategy, and the EV strategy, and the climate budget that I want just to focus on. And of course, it's a lot of other things as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The only question I have is that when, for your EV, you're like giving so many discounts. So that means the money coming into the government coffers is getting less.
I think a person like Elon Musk, you probably know him, he's in your neighborhood. I think that he has been able to develop his electric cars because of the market in Norway.
Yeah.
So it has been mass production. And of course, because so many people have actually bought electric cars. So as a small, quite rich country, then we have been able to push that. But if people in Paris and London and elsewhere really start to use electric vehicles, then it will really count. For us, it will have some consequences. So it's an investment. I will call it an investment.
Thank you. That's what we wanted to hear. So next is Mayor and Professor Worsner of Heidelberg. So one of the big issues in California climate and air policy has been the adverse impact of heavy diesel trucks and equipment on disadvantaged sections of our society, especially in our cities. The cities here this week are pledging to be diesel-free by 2033, which also means they reduce their black carbon emissions. I know German cities recently won a court case allowing them to restrict diesel emissions in the face of reluctance to do this at the German federal level. So cities have taken the leadership. Does Heidelberg plan to take action on diesel and black carbon emissions in the future?
Yes, of course. First of all, I wanted to go into your question. Then I wanted to go a little bit into the history and wanted to go a little bit into the international relation of experience exchange of cities. First of all, to your question, yes, of course, if you're not active, sometimes you need regulations to understand that the air quality standard is such in a bad mode that you have to act. But this is when the train already crashed the wall. Yeah? So that's not a future-oriented policy. It's a policy which totally failed over the last decades. That's a big problem. So if you too much listen to the car industry, you come to this point where we are at the moment with the diesel industry. And we have to be a little bit careful. Diesel is not a big problem if you run good diesel cars. The problem is if you just have diesel cars with stupid emission control and catalysator technique. So we have to be a little bit careful. The normal petrol car can be more environmental problematic because of the smallest PM10 and PM2.5 parts per million particles. So there is still a big problem, and I hate a discussion. Diesel is bad, and a little bit petrol and electric is good. Therefore, and I like the example, don't misunderstand me, I like the example of Oslo to give a tax reduction because it's the state activity in a cooperation with the city to support better technology for cars. But it's just a better technology for cars. So in Oslo, the problem is now they stop in some areas the program because the bus lanes are so crowded now with Teslas that the buses can't move. And this is stupid because in a bus we know 100 persons more sitting in the bus than in a car. So we have to think from the beginning. And this means a strategy planning. A strategy planning is what we always try to implement if you have a clear program. That's what Oslo do, what Paris do, what Heidelberg do, and a lot of other cities start with a strategy plan. This is what we have done in the year 1988. It was at that time the biggest EU funding program for a climate action plan of a city. How to combat global warming at the local level. So in each fields, renewables, retrofitting, behavior, so in all sectors. If you have this program, you understand we need more than 2 years of heavy discussions with any political groups, with the citizens in the city, what we can do. And if you don't have this broad citizens engagement, when you prepare the first program, you would never implement a program because you're not discussing the boundaries and barriers in the process. So therefore, my message is always start with an action program, but don't forget the citizens. But we're normally quite involved in this topic, so political and citizens engagement is number one to change everything. First of all, you start in your program what you can do. You have 3 pillars. Be a good example, be a regulator, be a motivator of a city. Being a good example means if you, in such a building, you have your OLED technology, you have your high qualified cooling system, so this building is using, I would say, 50 times more energy than our buildings which we are using in Heidelberg. And this is the university. Hey, what's about it? Yeah, if you learn here how to serve for the next generation, you have to be in rooms where you can see the future and not the past. That was the reason why we start at the beginning with our own buildings, because nobody wants to believe the mayor if he's talking about climate change and the windows have such big, the wind is going through and the schools are in an ugly position. That was the reason why we said we start with a 3% impact of our own buildings. That's what we have done. Use a lot of contracts, so money from business companies, have a strategic plan implemented by the city council, every biannual report, what we have achieved, pump in a bunch of money from the city, but we get the acceptance from the city council because we invited the city council, the citizens, and they force us. So it was a push and pull strategy. And by doing so, we've reduced the total energy demand of all buildings, of all schools, facilities, of more than 50% of the last 15 years. So it's a half of the energy consumption today than 50 years ago. And we are one of the fastest growing cities in Germany. Yeah. Second point is, what can you do else? We have a close relation to schools. So we try to start with a school retrofitting program because we think sustainable movement starts with your brain. We always say, not be an environmentalist, just use your brain. Yeah? And then you come to the point that you throw out money for wasting energy or wasting money, and this helps a lot to get out of the corner of the organic environmentalist group, which like this topic very much also today. But this is not enough. You have to go to the financing industry, to the business industry, and they don't hate this topic, but they don't care if they're not effective. So by doing so, we started with these programs in schools. We have now in more than 70% of our schools e-teams, energy teams. They run around, make prompts. And why? Because we give them a subsidy. We made a clear deal. If you save energy, we give you all of the money back to your school program. You can build a PV on your school, or you have a nice holiday with your school. And the interesting thing is, after we have done this, we noticed they earn more money, yeah, than we gave them for all schools' computers in the annual budget. But just reducing 10 or 15% of the energy demand. Because this building, for example, is using such a bunch of money, which is not used for education. It's just used for stupid energy consumption. And this is the point. So if we start the program, please schools work with us, they were not working with you, we're too busy. If we give them some money, they start thinking about it, and they are absolutely integrating this into the process. So awareness, what you can achieve as a first pillar, best practice example. I come to the traffic and energy traffic sector next. A regulator means I believe that we're not talking about structures, which is absolutely necessary. So if you're talking to me as a mayor of Heidelberg, I have my own energy utility. I decide we buy just 100% green for what we buy for our consumers. Yeah? I decide to set up a long-distance heating network, which costs a bunch of money. I decide to implement wind power plants, not a private company. I decide, that we are now going into the cooling market out of heat. But you need the responsibility and you need the possibility to run your own energy utility. This is not the case in many cities globally. It's mostly state-related. EDF in France, in Italy, and so on and so on. So regulator means empower the cities. I am the owner of all trams and buses in Heidelberg. So we spend a bunch of money into this program to start with mass transports. In the next 3 years, I will spend about 160 million euro in expanding the tram system, not the car force track or whatever. So this is what you can do if you are empowered. I'm also the owner of the own Citibank. Nearly 65% of the whole credits going to private companies I have to sign. This is very helpful. So you can work together with your business. And you see, if you go a little bit more into detail, that there's a totally different of the possibility of mayors and cities who have a responsibility or not. So be also regulator. We're able to decide in a new area which we have built, is now, I think, globally the biggest zero-emission city which is built. It's a whole city, not just buildings. They are all nearly zero-emission buildings. 15 kilowatt-hour per square meter. This is nearly nothing. And we built a new power plant based on renewables with our own utility for more than 25 million euro to serve the rest of the energy. Because you're responsible for everything. If you have a city council who has a biannual report of your activity, you can use them to go into such strong relations. At the beginning, nobody was saying there will nobody coming into this area because it's too expensive. Today, it's the place where all the people like to live. You have a very low second flat rate for energy consumption, which is sometimes higher than the normal flat rate. Also for social housing, very important, and so on and so on. And so that means the regulator and the motivator is then to go. And last point, international sector. That was the reason why I'm going to the international sector. I'm also the president of Energy-City. Sudha is my vice president, and we achieved, together with Sefcovic, the EU Commission, and Bloomberg, the C40 cities, that we have now signed what we call the Covenant of Mayors, so a self-commitment of cities who not signed the UN Convention, who not signed the Rio Convention. Yeah? It's just state level. We accept it and go further to want it to be zero-free 2030, 2035, or whatever. But the total agenda is to start with SERPs, so Sustainable Environment Action Plans, have to be decided by the City Council, and more than 7,700 cities have already signed this declaration. And this is now a movement which we wanted to use also here in San Francisco to give those friends in the United States hope that they are not just browns in California or some other cities in the United States. There is a big international movement.
You have convinced us. We're all moving to Heidelberg. All want to be mayor. I have decided we all want to be mayors in Heidelberg. So much power in one person, and you can make change. We all want to be there, right? Okay, so you have competition coming up.
No problem.
The next is the Honorable Mayor and Professor Waltz of Warsaw. So, Poland's economy has experienced a long period of uninterrupted economic expansion since 1992. In 2017, Poland's economy gained momentum as consumption continued to grow and spending of EU funds accelerated public investment. However, some controversial economic legislation dampened optimism in some sectors, such as retail, renewable energy, healthcare, and investors have pointed to the outsized role of state-owned and state-controlled companies in the Polish economy as an impediment to dynamic growth. Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
Thank you very much for, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I was here 25 years ago on the conference on banking issues, and it was exactly the starting point of our transition.
Yes.
So in 1988, we had still meat and gasoline on coupons. So our starting point was a little bit different. I can say, of course, at the time, also before '89, the economy was based on coal, on Silesia, and even now it's a little bit changed, but still this is many votes in Silesia for each government. So it means it's not so easy to change from the political point of view. But I think that I always do my responsibility not so regarding on the government, because first of all we had many governments. When I was the governor of the central bank, I survived about 7 prime ministers and 9 ministers of finance, because it was the transition period. So we have to do our job. You know, the cities have to do our job. Unfortunately, we don't have oil like Norway, but thanks to the EU funds, and I am serious saying this, when we started to get EU funds, which was relatively recently, because in 2004. So our life has been changed in the cities. And of course, the big cities, they are the main driving force in changing and watching what's going on the issue of climate change. So first of all, in 2011, Warsaw adopted the Sustainable Energy Action Plan. It calls for reducing CO emission and energy consumption by 20%, so it was less ambitious than in Paris, but for us it's really a lot. And also in 2003, we also adopted the Low Carbon Economy Plan, which foresaw the spending of €4 billion on improving air quality and energy efficiency. I don't want to quote also our I would say, declaration. I would like to talk about our activity, mainly in 4 divisions: transportations, buildings, district heating, and eco-subsidies. I chose the most interesting and more advanced, I would say. So first of all, if you talk about transportation, this is a case which we are very lucky, because we never liquidated the tram rails. Unfortunately, we started to build our subway quite late, because the first plan was in the 40s and in the 50s of last century, but because of the war it couldn't happen. So we, in 2009, I finished the first line, and we started to build, and we are continuing the second line of subway. Also, it's about 1 million. The people, of course, from the point of view of climate change, is very it's very important. And of course, we are buying electric cars. We bought already 40. We would like to buy buses, electric buses again, 160 buses. So in fact, we are changing all our public transport, also, I can say this way maybe. Also tramways we have, and of course in the underground we had all Soviet wagons. In the case of buses we had, because of the Common system, we had the Hungarian Icarus. Now you can find in the streets these old transportation vehicles. I think that what is good, you know, our public transportation is very cheap and very efficient, And thanks to this, 60% of people use public transportation, which is quite unusual. And we, all the time, we build the rail, we enlarge our subway, and of course we exchange the buses. So it's really, if you count these two lines, not the second not finished, but with the fast train, like I came here, yes, to the university, it's together will be, you can count 6 lines, which sounds better. And it's more convenient. So this is our main, and we couldn't do it without the EU, so I would like to thank my colleagues from Paris, from Heidelberg, that you contribute to the change of our transportation. And I can assure you that the money was spent very well. And we use also no refunds. And oh, I forgot about Portugal. I think that's very important to say this, because not all governments representatives do this. Yes, so
Absolutely.
Exactly. Buildings. Buildings. In the case of buildings, we are planning. Maybe we could like introduce this new system in our, we call it not social housing but municipal housing, and we try to do it, for example, the protecting biodiversity, increasing the building's energy efficiency, creating conditions for strong supportive communities, and of course defining standards in housing development. We are working now on Warsaw standard housing, because we think that it's very important. District heating is very important because you probably are not aware that Warsaw has the longest district heating network system in the EU, 1,800 kilometers. And 80% of the needs of Warsaw citizens covered by district heating, but of course it was quite old system, not maintained in a proper way. So since 2012, more than 100 kilometers of the network have been built in addition. And what else? Eco-subsidies. Eco-subsidies, we give, when we support our citizens in installing individual renewable energy sources like photovoltaics, solar panels, and heat pumps by providing them with financial incentives, which are, in Polish standards, are quite high, because it's $4,000 per person and $11,000 for the entrepreneur, if they decide to change. So we offer from our budget the subsidies, and we think it's quite important. And also we have probably, like in many cities, that around the center we have individual housing, yes, individual houses. And if they decide to change the stoves, the way of heating for friendly, environment friendly, they get also the money, not so much as in this case, but they get till 75% of the cost of the cost, yes. And I think that that we work hardly, and that's it. You asked me about the government. The government declares a lot, but we are there.
You're definitely
All cities are the same.
very well. Thank you so much. Last but not the least, the Honorable Mayor Jacinto from Idanha-a-Nova. So what we found is that government policies with strong emphasis on mitigation were introduced at the end of 1990s in Portugal. As greenhouse gas emissions continued to rise beyond its Kyoto target for 2012, your country had to resort to the Kyoto flexibility mechanisms in order to comply. So climate change adaptation policies were introduced in 2010, but they are far from fully implemented. And how are you, as a mayor of your city, managing to do that?
Well, I go to make an answer different. I have a little presentation.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
I know everybody has questions, so I want to make sure we
Because my city, it's a different city from this city. Because we came from, I don't know if... Coming? Okay.
Yeah, but you can go ahead.
Because I come from a rural city, a little rural city. And in this climate change, it's important to make a good cooperation to the urban cities and rural areas. That's why I came from Portugal. I'm the mayor of Idanha-a-Nova, a municipality in Portugal. Well, before, welcome to Idanha, and thank you for this invitation. Idanha is a largely rural area near to Spain. We have, for example, in our scale, 2.3 times bigger than Madrid. But in our inhabitants, we have 3,000, and Madrid in Museu Reina Sofia has per day 10,000 visitors. Idanha, Idanha has organic territory and has 3 brands from UNESCO. Naturtejo Geopark, it's a UNESCO World Geopark. Idanha-a-Nova, it's a UNESCO Creative City of Music. It's the rural city in the whole in this network. And Tejo Internacional, it's a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. Idanha adds to the first organic bio district in Portugal. This is a brand developed in Italy, Europe, a green strategy brand. What is our real problem in my municipality? It's the same problem in the majority of the territories in the interior in Portugal. It's the exodus from rural areas to the big cities. And in our case, our decreasing population is 70%. Because of this, we have a perception, this problem has a negative perception about rural life in Portugal. And because of this, the soil desertification has grown. Another consequence of the decreasing of population, it was the big fires last year we have in Portugal. Well, this is a problem or an opportunity. For us, it's an opportunity. That's why we created a new Idanha brand idea to develop a green brand. Our main objective is to create a strong brand, be a reference in rural innovation, create a strong impact in local economy. We developed one process with 6 steps to determine what we stand for. So, what is our central idea? Restart Idanha-a-Nova. I invite everybody. And restart surrounded by nature. We have 4 programs. Idanha Green Valley. We want to be the first green Silicon Valley in the world. Some sub-programs. Idanha Life to create the best life conditions to live in Idanha. That's why we invite everyone to live in Idanha. Another program, it's Idanha Try. To trying Idanha-a-Nova with experience and emotions. Last but not least, the Idanha Made in. Idanha Made in will show to the world the great things we do in Idanha. In 2018, we developed some important and innovating projects in Idanha. Idanha Food Lab. Idanha Food Lab is an accelerator focused on developing sustainable food solutions composed by a boot camp and a demo day, an annual event. This is our goals for next 5 years, and our results with Food Lab Bootcamp, and our results with Food Lab annual event. We created with the cooperations to Spain, Extremadura, near to my municipality, a rural innovation rural forum to provide solutions for a rural life. Our goals, our results in 2017, and our results in our strategy with these idea brands. With the presentation in Lisbon, and this is the numbers of the business, the projects, and the investment in Idanha-a-Nova. And in the social media, we invert our recognition in the news, but global recognition about the rural life. It's different in this moment. And our migratory balance, it's now very reducing. Some opinion about some people in this moment moving to Idanha. William family, and came from England. Lawrence family came from Lisbon. The Boom Festival, it's the most ecological and sustainable festival in the world. It's in Idanha-a-Nova, not in the big city, it's in Idanha-a-Nova. And an example, very good, Living Seeds. It's a company to compete with Monsanto. You know Monsanto?
Oh, yeah.
No, you don't know Monsanto. Monsanto is the most beautiful village in Portugal. As the name Monsanto, the most typical village in Portugal. It's very beautiful. But Living Seeds, it's developed by Stefan Dobling. They come from Germany. And finally, the Gonçalo Amorim. It's the manager of our Idanha Food Lab Accelerator with the cooperations of European Commission, with in the Grey Bella, Boston, USA, and MIT, Portugal. Thank you. See you.